What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and it is lovely to be back here. We're recording this the week before Thanksgiving, so probably come out either the week of Thanksgiving. So you guys, when you're going crazy on your Green Wednesday night, can turn on Elevate Your Grind and learn you something. Yeah, I think that's when this will come out. And then we're going into MJ Biz, going to be recording live from the Greenleaf / Green Check booth on the MJ Biz 4 on Thursday. So oh no, the AI thing is here. Guys, we use Zoom to record this, and for some reason, there's this new Zoom AI tool where, like, if I thumbs up, this like virtual thumbs up, there it is, comes in, and watch this. Ready? Come on, do it. Boom. So somehow we're going to figure out how to integrate this into the show, but it might happen automatically. If it happens automatically, I'm going to figure out how to turn it off. So getting back to it, Thursday at MJ Biz will be broadcasting live. So you want to come out to check out the show, come check us out on the sales floor, show floor. We will also have to figure out another recording spot that is outside of MJ BizCon, because a lot of people I know aren't actually going to the show. They're just going to Vegas and taking advantage of everyone being there. So if you guys have a cool spot you want us to set up, bring some attention to you, hit me up at UIG Pod on Instagram or YouTube, wherever you want to contact us. So my guest today, I am a big fan of the company here. Like, I think they are right at the center of the cannabis universe. I think they have access to more information about the industry than anybody else. And I would say that the single-handed smartest guest that I did not feel like I was qualified enough to have a conversation with was the founder and CEO of this company. So if I know anything about entrepreneurs, they're known by the company that they keep. So I'm worried that I'm going to have to be able to keep up with our guest today too. Please welcome Ben Burstein of LeafLink. Ben, thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you so much for having me on, Todd. I'm going to hope to do as good of a job as Ryan has, but really, I just have so
No,
much respect for everything you do for our industry.
Don't do as good
You
a job as
definitely,
Ryan, because then I'm going to be sitting here just anxious. Like, can I stay in this conversation? Dude, it felt like I was boxing with Ali in the conversation with him.
no, you definitely know your stuff, so you don't have to sell yourself short.
Well, Ben, man, I appreciate you coming. I know I have to reach out to Kevin from Cannabinoid Connect. I'm a huge fan of his show. I was going to have him on probably like 2-3 years ago, shit, and I never did. But I appreciate you updating the background. You looked like a hostage in that interview. I was worried about you, but I'm glad to see that you're just in the office.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's nice to be in the office. We are headquartered in New York City, so very lucky to be in person with our team.
Very cool, man. Well, in my rant, in the introduction, we had talked about Green Wednesday. I know that you guys have some, unbelievable insight into the industry, because you sit like right at the nexus of the industry, your marketplace for most brands and retailers and everybody else. So you're seeing where everything's going. Do we expect to see a big bump in cannabis again for the holidays?
The answer is definitely yes. For anyone that's not familiar with LeafLink, we are the wholesale commerce platform for the industry. More than half of all products sold at dispensaries are purchased through our platform. We work with more than 9,000 retailers across the country, more than 3,000 brands. And in doing so, we think we get a really good insight into how product is moving across the platform. You have a lot of tech companies in the space that are either all the way downstream and work with retailers, or all the way upstream and work with the cultivation units. We're really like the only data platform in the industry that captures that full supply chain with legitimate end-to-end visibility, which I think gives us a lot of insight into what product trends are looking like, how is pricing moving, what are like the most popular products this week, and like really getting an understanding of how trends work at dispensaries. We use all of that data to help our customers optimize their businesses, better run their operations, and really make the most in an industry that's particularly challenging today. What I think is so special about the holidays is they're one of your highest sell-through periods of the entire year, right? In 420, in that week, you sell about 2.5 weeks of product. In the week leading up to Thanksgiving, like your Green Wednesday type sales, you sell about 2 weeks of product in one. So when we think about the weeks that are most impactful to your sales, as a retailer or a brand, it's really this holiday period that makes the biggest difference if you're going to be profitable or not at the end of the year. Look, we're sitting in an industry today where you're going to be unprofitable this year. Our job is to eliminate a lot of that challenge for operators across the space and help them better manage like the margin compression that's just been consistent across the country. What we do at LeafLink and what we've prepared for our customers and for the industry at wide for free is if you go to leaflink.com, the first thing that's going to pop up is our holiday sales guide. And in our holiday sales guide, we lay out 20 pages of tips, recommendations, product insights, and like all of the different things that you should think about as an operator when you're setting out your business. If I were to summarize it all into three key ideas, this is it. Number one, you have to optimize your inventory levels. You cannot run out of product on the highest sell-through days of the year. Two, you need to find the right product assortment. You need to make sure you're selling the right products that match those sales periods. And three, you really need to have a long-term promotional strategy where you're fine-tuning all of your discounting activities and really ensuring that they're improving the business as a whole. Let's start on inventory. Look, I think Green Wednesday is really analogous to Black Friday, where if you think about Black Friday sales, if you're Target and you run out of stuff to sell before noon, you're going to lose a lot of dollars on the back end of that day. There's just tons of stockouts, not enough product available, and it's a consistent issue in cannabis where we pull our customers on both the retail and the brand side, and our average customer loses more than 10% of their revenue due to stockouts every single year. Think about that. Like on an industry that's doing $30 billion of sales this year, that's $3 billion of lost sales due to not having enough inventory. The days where this is most directly impactful is on these holiday periods where you sell through product faster than ever.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that going on. I mean, I've experienced that myself where you're going to the dispensary with certain products in mind, especially like a lot of times out in California where, you know, there's certain brands. And like, for example, I love Super Silver Haze from Cannabiotics, right? One of my absolute favorite strains. And like, it'll say it's in stock or it's carried at a specific dispensary, but I have no clue if it's actually in stock. And I'm going there like excited to get Super Silver Haze because I see they have a decent size selection and they're out of that. Like a lot of times people say like, oh, a couple years ago, people would just, okay, well, let me get this or let me get that. I think that's going away, right? I think people are starting to be more educated and going in for what they want. On that note, with that information, I believe everything you said is super important, but I'd love for people to try to understand, and if you can provide insight into it, who's actually buying weed, right? Like, everybody believes they have this view of who the average consumer is. And I think most people are way fucking off, to be honest, right? You look at any other issue, like let's compare it to wine, just because, you know, wine has a very cult-like following around the people who truly enjoy wine. And it's very similar with the terpene profiles and everything else. But like those wine people, the ones who are truly connoisseurs of wine, are in the minority of the people who enjoy wine. They're in the extreme minority. And in fact, they're pretty fucking annoying to the rest of us most of the time. But my point being is like when you look at weed, you have the people that are really in the culture, that are really connoisseurs and know everything about it and the concentrates and everything else. You have the kind of curious on this side. And then I believe you have this huge group of people, just like wine, where you have people who are wine extremists. Then you have people who are wine enthusiasts. Then you have people who just really like wine and not want to know about it. And then you have people who know the wines that they like. And then you have people who know a couple wines they like. And then you have people who drink like the $7 bottle at Publix because they don't know, right? And we just don't pretend that exists in weed for some reason. Like my friends who are not in the industry look at me as a true weed guy, right? I know the strains I like. I know the different products. I know what's out there. I know what I like. I can talk about taste and effects and everything. But in the weed community, I'm not that. I'm the furthest thing from an expert, right? So I kind of believe that I'm like on the more enthusiastic side, but still on the average side of things. So I'm trying to figure out like who is the average consumer? What does Canna Curious really exist in the size that we think it is? Like what's going on with the people buying the product?
This is an amazing question, and it's one that I think about a lot. If there's anything you're going to take away from what we talked through today, it should be this. The people who consume cannabis more than once a day, so who we think of as like your stoners in the industry, account for over 90% of sales in the industry. So that means that almost all sales across all stores, across all states, are going to the people who consume the product the most. It's the people who have the highest velocity, come into the store the largest amount, have the largest basket sizes. Like you have a lot of brands that focus on your quintessential soccer mom, like the type of person that's going to walk into a store, buy a cartridge, and then use it for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And that customer is important. Like you want to make sure that you're appealing to the wider audience. But at the end of the day, the person who's really driving the vast, vast majority of your sales is the person who's buying large quantities of flour with their number one concern being price. So price sensitivity is the highest among the heaviest consumers. And those heavy consumers are the ones that you need to target with your sales strategies. Like bringing it back to the holidays, what we think of as like consumer types, still at the end of the day, it's about how do you attract those heavy consumers as much as you can to your store so that you're creating a new loyal customer with the highest expected lifetime value. Because like all of the different types of cannabis consumers are extremely important. And it's important as a store to stock the proper SKUs to make sure that cannabis is accessible to anyone, whether they have tons of experience or none at all. But the people that are driving almost all sales for every single company in this industry are the ones who use the product the most, the ones who know the most about the strains. Like, I think you're an expert in the space. You're one of the people who I think of as like the customers that brands need to think about. And when we think about these heavy consumers, like there's just not as many brands focused on putting out product that's as good as possible for the biggest value. And those segmentations matter a lot. It's one of the big reasons for price compression over time. You just have had this big shift from premiumization in the industry, like everyone trying to buy the best possible product you can get, to much more of like a value trend over the last 2 years of recessionary and inflationary impacts, where like the type of products that are having the highest sell through and highest velocity are large containers of flour priced as low as they can.
Yeah, man. I think all brands should be thinking of me specifically when they're doing their marketing. Um, so it is interesting to see that those in the culture are the ones that are driving the most business because they are buying larger quantities, the ones that are buying ounces when they can or when they're on special, right? They're buying concentrates as well too, which I believe concentrates have higher margin. It is not, my mom who goes to the dispensary and buys a pack of 10 edibles, and takes one a night or a half of one a night, and she buys edibles every 10 to 20 days. And, I would say she's probably a more frequent consumer. The interesting state would actually, I think, be where I live in Florida, where I think shit's turned on its side. I don't believe that the culture drives the business down here because I believe the culture in Florida still buys from the black market. With the way that we have it set up with 22 companies, we only have, everybody puts out a couple of good strains. We only have a couple places that are putting out broad menus consistently that are quality. But it is vertical integration down here. We only have 8 or 900,000 patients. I believe that the Florida market, ironically enough, is being driven by the senior community and the baby boomer community. And that's why and I hate, because I like these guys, but that's why the MSOs are thriving down here, is because they have that medical kick to it, right? Somebody doesn't mind going to a Columbia Care to buy their medical cannabis versus going to a Jungle Boys, right? When you go to Jungle Boys, you see more people like me in there. So would you say that Florida kind of bucks the national trend?
Yeah, you're spot on with that dynamic. The key difference in the customer journey in like a Florida versus one of your more legacy markets like a California is because of the vertical integration in Florida, your SKU counts and menu sizes are just significantly smaller, right? Like we see a lot of purchasing activity on LeafLink across all states. The average amount of SKUs in a store in Florida is around 300. The average amount of SKUs in a state like Washington, where you're not allowed to have vertical integration, is more than 3,000. So when you think about optionality in the industry, which is like one of the key preferences among your heavy consumers, the people driving the vast majority of the sales, like having more SKUs is more appealing to those types of customers. They want to try different strains. They want to see what are like new product innovations, what are the best new hot up and coming like concentrate types, right? Like you just don't have as much product diversity in Florida as you do across other states. Part of that definitely has to do with the dynamic, as you mentioned, with much more heavy senior consumption. Like most of the people registered in Florida's medical program are on the older end. That's different than a lot of other medical programs. And part of it is just like the MSO strategy of really focusing in on like the center of the state. Like when you think about store density in Florida, most stores are actually in Central Florida, non-South Florida or North Florida. And a lot of it has to do with capturing the senior population being really truthful with you, the biggest impact to patient counts in Florida is going to be if the federal government changes regulations on gun ownership and gun licensing and medical marijuana. Like, I've seen estimates that assume the medical patient population in Florida would more than double if you're allowed to have both a concealed carry license and you're allowed to have a medical card. So I think that's probably your
Well,
biggest like
the
predicament
weird thing
to.
about that is you actually you don't have to have a concealed carry license to conceal carry in the state of Florida anymore. We have the
Huh.
right, we have that right now, which is crazy. And I think what's weird is I don't know if people know that or not, but the other part of it, it's so what people don't realize is it's not just a concealed carry. So I actually took a chance. I got my medical card in 2019, and right before I got my so the reason that you can have both, it's the way in which you get them, right? And I don't know if I've gone into this on the show before, but when you sign for a concealed carry or when you purchase a firearm, you have to fill out a federal form. And on that form, it specifically asks you if you consume narcotics. And it lists marijuana under there. And it says, even if they're legal within the state in which you reside. I believe if you answer yes to that question, you're not allowed to have the firearm or the concealed carry license. If you say no, you're committing perjury. And obviously, it's very easy to get caught because you're registered to the state medical marijuana program, right? So what I did at that point in time, we'll call it allegedly because I'm pretty sure it's legal, but is I renewed my concealed carry first. And then once my concealed carry was renewed, because it lasts for like 6 or 7 years, I went and got my medical marijuana license because I was not committing perjury at that time. I went and got my license and took the chance that in the 6 or 7 years that it took to renew, that would change. Now I had 2 firearms I didn't intend to buy anymore. So I was okay with that. And I thought, again, it would change in the near future. Now I'm getting to a point where it's not, we're getting to that time and it hasn't changed yet. So although they have the right to conceal carry without getting the permit in the state of Florida, what you don't have the ability is to purchase new firearms without committing perjury. So that is what
Interesting.
needs to change, I believe.
No, thanks for explaining that. It makes sense. I mean, look, overall, the key
Only because
is,
I'm in the thick of it do I know this.
yeah, I think overall it's just, again, like one of the many, many, many headwinds to volume growth in the space. But yeah, I think Florida is interesting, right? It's a medical state. That's the third largest by total sales. I guarantee you, once Florida goes to adult use, whenever that happens, it's going to be the largest state in the country by sales.
Oh yeah.
Tourists a year that come to Florida the most of any state. And as a tourist, you have a much higher propensity to consume cannabis. So I think that's going to all be very strong trends towards growth. It's one of the reasons Nevada's market is so large, despite the small population. You just have really strong tourist growth. So I like Florida a lot. I think it's a strong market. It'll be interesting to see what happens with like the 24 ballot proposition, but definitely
Yeah.
some optimism to be had.
Not to make it all about me and in Florida, but the crazy thing to me in Florida is the strategy that everybody takes, even the new license holders that come in, right? We talk about the concentration of dispensaries. Now, I think one of the things that gives Trulieve their advantage is in many of the places in Florida, they're the only game in town. They got 130 dispensaries, so they have the ability to put it in towns that are not named Fort Lauderdale and Orlando and Jacksonville. But what blows my mind is that nobody has tried to dominate a region of Florida. Everyone's trying to dominate the state, and I don't understand that. Now, obviously, I believe the people at the top of these MSOs are much smarter than me, at least publicly, I believe that. And I don't understand why someone doesn't try to dominate Fort Lauderdale and then expand out from there into the rest of the Tri-County area, or someone doesn't try to dominate the Tampa Bay region or even the I-4 corridor. Like, as soon as somebody comes into Florida, Jungle Boys did it, the Flowery is doing it, Gold Leaf is doing it. They pop one up and wherever close to their cultivation is. So the Flowery in North Miami, Gold Leaf out in Sebring. Jungle Boys was actually up in Ocala was the first one. And then the next one is Miami. And then the next one is Orlando. And then the next one is in Jacksonville. And it's like, I understand that these are all major municipalities, but you would be able to control your supply chain, your freshness, and everything else if like you started in downtown Tampa and then you went out to residential Tampa, then you went over to St. Pete, and then you went down to Sarasota, right? And then you crawled your way down the west. Like, I feel like we have the best weed in this region. You can scale it very nicely, and that would create brand loyalty. So I think we're, obviously we're getting way outside the purview of LeafLink. Maybe we're not. Maybe this is something you help people with. But I don't understand why a single company in Florida has not tried to just dominate a region, and then they try to take on this 38 million person state with only 900,000 patients, one giant geography at a time.
Yeah, I think like you're right directionally for sure, where there's just some density issues with how stores are built out. There's obviously like some restrictions on municipal placements of the stores. Obviously, like the name of the game in Florida is having enough stores to internalize all of your product that you manufacture. You are only able to have as many stores as canopy capacity that you have to supply those. It's one of the issues a lot of the MSOs have faced as they scale up their store counts is how do you properly balance your supply and demand dynamics with your internalized sales? It's a lot easier to do when you can control the prices at retail, but at the same time, you've had huge like discounting and price compression at the retail level in Florida because of this density that you're mentioning. So I think it'll be interesting. Florida's issuing another like 20 to 30 licenses in the next year, theoretically. So
Yeah.
with those new licenses, I'm sure some of them are hopefully listening to the show and are going to pursue your strategy because I think you're right and that makes sense. And it's definitely something we at LeafLink here help our customers with. Again, like we take all of the data that we feed in through the platform and turn it back anonymized to our customers so that they understand, hey, like where products selling for the most, what zip codes are the best for us to sell our SKUs, what dispensaries are probably the best targets for us to look at. Like this is all productized information we feed back to our customers and something I think is extraordinarily valuable for them. So definitely something we think about.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's phenomenal insight. So looking at the rest of the country, we'll leave Florida in the rearview mirror. What are the markets, next year, 2024, that are exciting you? Is it the Northeast, or is it some of the existing markets like Michigan or Arizona? What are the markets that we think are going to blow up this year?
Yeah, it's a great question. US retail sales are tracking for around $30 billion this year. That's going to be up 15% from last year's total of around 26 to 27. Those sources of growth are actually pretty concentrated. Like among Missouri, you're getting another 700 million of sales going from around a $400 million medical market to slightly over a billion this year. You have a state in Maryland that was running at like 4 to 500 million annually as a medical market is now doing about a billion as a recreational state. Then you have Michigan continuing this really aggressive pace of retail growth with new stores opening in Detroit, contributing to overall growth in the state. And then you have Florida, just the continued opening of these MSO stores, despite not contributing as many marginal sales as like a lot of the stores that you have today, are still contributing to growth. So when we think about those four states, Missouri, Maryland, Michigan, and Florida, they're accounting for more than two-thirds of growth in the country this year. Think about that. That's where growth is coming from. Maryland, Missouri, Florida, and Michigan. When we think about 24, there's a few different states that are really going to be considerate for leading growth. I think it's going to be the Northeast. New Jersey and New York have thousands of licenses that they're planning to issue across the supply chain. Again, the key challenge is how do those licenses convert into active businesses? Capital constraints and difficulty raising money has made it really difficult to operationalize issued licenses over the last year across the country. Like you have 200 retail licenses that were issued in Illinois. You have tons of new licenses getting ready to be issued in Minnesota. You had new store licenses issued in Ohio that are now actually going to open because you have legal sales starting at some point soon, hopefully. But I think the key is like, how do we anticipate license growth to continue for the next like 3 to 6 months? And that's what's going to contribute to like our second half of 24 growth. But really, growth is determined by how much retail accessibility customers have to the market. And that's probably not going to expand significantly over the next 6 months. Like there's just not new stores that are really ready to come online. You're going to have 20 new stores in Ohio. That brings them to like 130 issued licenses. I guarantee those are going to come online. You're going to have like the new licenses issued in Maryland, another state that's going to issue almost 1,000 licenses across supply chain. So I think those are the states that are setting up the country for future growth. It's going to be legal sales in Ohio, new licenses issued in New York, New Jersey, growth of legal sales in Missouri and Maryland. But like, I don't think those trends are that different from what we're seeing today. So really, it's just concentrated growth and the continued process of legacy markets are facing significant challenges to their total sales. Like total sales year over year in Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington are all down 10 to 20%. Part of it has to do with price compression for sure. Like that's one of the big impacts. Another part of it has just been that foot traffic volume is basically flat. Like there's not new growth of stores in a lot of these more mature markets. And without bringing on new stores, it's really difficult to generate new sales in these states. So I think like a California that's doing about $5 billion of sales this year is probably going to do 5 billion of sales next year. You have a state like Colorado that's at 1.7, they're probably going to do something similar next year. But the growth of these new markets like Missouri, Maryland, Ohio, Florida, Michigan, New York, New Jersey, like these are going to displace a lot of these more legacy markets. So when I think about growth trends, like those are the states that I really pay a lot of attention to, and it's the ones where you're going to have the most retail licenses issued.
So that's where we're going to see the most growth. But like California is going to do $5 billion in sales. It will continue to do $5 billion in sales, until they figure out the tax structure there. Like I think we're actually losing stores and we're losing cultivators. And by say losing, they ain't going anywhere. They're just going back to the black market, right? Like you have someone who's been cultivating weed for within their family for 50 years. They get a license. They can't afford that license. They're not growing tomatoes anymore. You know what I mean? Like they're still
Yeah, I
growing.
mean, the number of outdoor licenses outstanding in California is down 40% from last year. That's like a 20 to 30% impact on capacity. I definitely agree. There's some more volume that's incrementally going to the illicit market. But for the most part, I just think actually that some of this right sizing of capacity upstream, where you have cultivators exiting in California, and significantly less like wet weight pounds harvested in states like Oregon, Michigan, like the volume was basically flat year over year with tons of more stores. Like these supply and demand trends are actually getting better, not worse. And I think that's one of the key indicators that we've had a really difficult time for our industry the last 2 years. Like we've been in the strongest down cycle in probably the industry's history. It's very symbolic of like some of the trends that we saw from mature markets, like in Oregon in 2019, where they basically had to burn warehouses full of product because you had too much of it. So I think that those supply and demand balances are improving going forward, which is going to lead to higher prices, better margins for a lot of these companies, significantly higher like upstream raw material prices. I mean, we saw on our platform in Michigan last year, there were keys of distillate being sold for under $1,000. Like, think about that. That's a pound of flour being sold at equivalent price of like $50. That doesn't make any sense, and it was like a significant loss leader. Those trends have significantly improved today. Where like a key of distillate in Michigan is trading for around 6 to 8 thousand. You have wholesale bulk availability $500 to $1,000. Like these are much better pricing structures than we had a year ago. So I think that's probably going to continue. This harvest was just smaller than people expected. But again, it's just a lot of these markets are so oversupplied that the oversupply is either converted into distillate and held in warehouses or funneled into the illicit market. And that balance has shifted over time with like different compliance allocations, stuff like that.
So you say right now new stores are what's growing the industry, but is it new stores? Like we have to have new consumers at some point, right? I mean, at some point the average consumer is only going to buy so much weed. Maybe for a reason or for a sale they'll buy more than usual, but even the people who are buying a ton, they're only going to buy so much of it, right? Are we seeing consumer bases grow as well? Like are the Canna Curious turning over? It seems to be more popular. And how do we grow this industry besides just popping up more stores to go after the same consumer group?
If you're going to go buy a beer near your house, you're probably going to go to the closest convenience store. That's probably going to be a few minutes from your house. The biggest impact on legal sales, so like whether you're a consumer and you're buying from the illicit or legal markets, actually has nothing to do with price. That's a misconception. The most important aspect for people, whether consuming legally or not, is proximity to a legal store. So people want to buy legal cannabis. Like everyone's interested in the product now. You just had a Gallup poll come out. 70% of the population in this country is supporting legalization or a more robust medical market. Like that's the highest ever. So I think you have this really strong interest and undercurrent in like better understanding cannabis as a product, but it's really hard to do so if you don't have a store close to where you live, or you're not passing a dispensary, or you don't have like opportunities to go to those stores. Like people aren't going an hour, 2 hours out of their way to go buy product, especially if they don't know if they like it, they don't know
Yeah.
what's going to be there, they're not sure what's interesting to them. So I think proximity to new stores is the most important way to get new consumers out to the market. That's like one of the reasons you've had such strong growth in Florida over time is just as you build out that density more aggressively, you have more sales. Another state we could think of is California, right? It's that two-tier structure between municipal approvals and state approvals, where you have a state legal system where people can put dispensaries wherever they want, but then two-thirds of municipalities don't allow cannabis businesses to locate within them. So you actually have like extremely strong illicit activity in these parts of the state where you don't have dispensaries within 50 or 100 miles. But then in places like downtown LA or in some of the large cities that have really strong like dispensary densities, there's not as big of a problem with illicit cannabis just because you have all of those stores really covering people. So like legal products are typically more expensive than the illicit market, like that's for sure. But what we've seen is that people don't care about paying those like incrementally few dollars for like compliance reasons, new product innovations, accessibility to like knowing that your product has been tested and is good. So look, it's opening new stores is really the way that you're going to get more growth and more consumers to enter this industry.
Yeah, it is interesting. I feel like, in a place where you live, like in Manhattan, well, Manhattan, you have a whole different issue because you have the fake dispensaries. But, the one cool thing about Manhattan is there have been a lot of times, and maybe more as like a tourist or a visitor, where I'm walking down the street, I see a store, I'm like, oh, that looks cool, and I'll pop in, right? Like I'm less likely to do that down here in Florida, driving in my car, hitting the brakes and going a U-turn, right? So I feel like you guys, because Manhattan is really like the nexus of the world, and so many people come there and visit, and more tourists and more visitors and businesses and everything else, like once they kind of get their shit together and have more legal dispensaries than illegal dispensaries, that it's going to be it's going to be the Canna Curious capital. I kind of Vegas is too, but Vegas, it's not in your everyday path. Like you have to go seek it out, not seek it out like you did illegally in Vegas, but Planet 13, although near the strip, is not on the strip. And Vegas is not a walking place. So I feel like New York is really going to be that spot where people go and try weed. Like, yes, but California, again, it's a driving thing. But if you're walking to dinner and one guy in your group or gal in your group is a smoker and they say, hey, can we pop in here real quick? That's much easier and a much more convenient dispensary experience than anywhere else you're probably going to see it.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I mean, I live in downtown Manhattan, so I see firsthand, like you have almost 1,500 illicit stores across Manhattan alone. You have about 10 legal stores across all of New York City combined. So if you're the average consumer that's walking by a store, you don't even know if it's
No.
legal or not. You don't know if the product is from New York or not. And this is coming from people like there's people that work at LeafLink who are pretty interested consumers and they don't know if a store is legal or not. And like these are some of the most educated consumers in the entire state and they don't know. So if you're the average person walking into a store today, like you can walk into a illicit store and it doesn't really look any different than those legal stores. Prices are significantly lower. You have wider product availability. There's more SKUs there. Like it's just been a challenge for the state overall. I mean, I think we always have to consider like the objectives of New York's rollout of licensing was not just to create like a robust business program. It was to create a more equitable market where you focused on bringing attention back to like a lot of these disadvantaged communities. I think that's still going to be the focus as they like broaden out the licensing structure to avoid a lot of like the lawsuits and hindrances that the state has faced. But like I really do agree with you in that like the easiest accessibility is what's going to drive the most interest and whether it's selling it in like more dispensaries or having wider product availability like in Minnesota where you could sell hemp derived THC beverages anywhere supermarkets in Total Wine and Spirits they
Or
have
even
entire
in
aisles of it
Georgia
now.
where you get it from legitimate pharmacies.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, right? Like where as you get more locations and distribution points, and like this is like we're just talking about physical locations. Another part of it is that cannabis is an omnichannel sales strategy where you have both online and in-person sales. Like there's tons of stuff to do online that operators have to figure out and better optimize. Part of that is the challenges with working with like the big tech companies and cannabis. They're definitely becoming more friendly to it though. So I think that you're going to have like overall growth in the consumer base, but as I keep saying, like it definitely has to do more with like the retail accessibility and not so much as like on some of the rollout structures.
It's interesting though, because like, yeah, I have friends going back to like the online, the e-commerce thing. Like here in Florida, obviously I know what I want. I typically will order delivery. Jungle Boys, I love them to death, but they're like just outside the range of where I want to drive. So if I'm going past it, I'll stop. The Flowery does great. I want to tell them they have great delivery because they're my friends, but they send you a fucking window, dude. It's 8 to 8, literally. Like they say next day delivery, great. It will come the next day, but they're worse than AT&T. Like, all of a sudden I get a link in the morning. So sometimes it's okay. Sometimes I'll get a link in the morning and it will have an estimated time, and then you add like 2 to 2.5 hours to that time because people are slow, they're not at home, whatever it is, and it'll tell you about how many stops you can find it, figure it out. But I ordered some 710 labs from them the other day, and I literally got a text that said your delivery window is 8 to 8. And it's like, wait, what? So my point being is like, that's not convenient, but I know that's the weed that I want to buy. Like I'm not, around me, I have True Leave, which has Alien Labs and Connected, and they're really good, but I hate paying $60 an eighth because I'm cheap. I've got Columbia Care by me, I've got Sanctuary, I've got Grow Healthy, and I have Air. And like candidly, the stuff I like comes from the Flowery. So I have a bunch of dispensaries here. And because I am who I am and I have the knowledge that I have, like I'm willing to deal with the bullshit with delivery. But my friends that I smoked with my whole life that are not in the industry, that have real professional lives, like they run down the street to True Leave, or they just go to whatever's convenient because it's convenient. Even though they even say like the stuff that they smoke with me is better, it's just easy for them and they don't want to deal with delivery. They just want to pop in and get it. And I got to say, even the experience of popping in, there is no popping into a dispensary, especially if they're kind of busy at the time. It's not like, you're popping into 7-Eleven and grabbing a 12 pack to go drink with your buddy, right? Like you are going there, you're handing your license over. Like, do you think, what is it going to take to make e-commerce and delivery better where the average consumer is willing to try it there? Because there's accessibility there. It's just not in your face. You have to be willing to seek it out a little, but you can get better products at a wider range there.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Florida's different in structure than a lot of your other like
Yeah, we're fucked
legacy
up down
and
here.
wider stripe markets, just because like you don't have the large presence of these B2C type platforms. Like you don't really have like a centralized Leafly, Dutchy, Weed Maps type experience where they're managing like the full front end for the end consumer, where they can buy their most desirable product, and then it's going to come in like a really tight window with like a whole fulfillment and last mile system managed by these e-com players. Like it just doesn't exist like that in Florida. It's much more fulfilled by the store. The stores in control of the delivery. They're the ones managing that entire process. So I think like as you scale out and go to more of like your Uber Eats type model versus like more of your store to store model, you're going to get a lot more consistency in the way that like delivery and e-com works in the state. I agree with you. Having a 12-hour pickup when like a 12-hour delivery window is never going to work long
No.
term, like just a sustainable delivery strategy. But it's one that like you've had large companies like a Weed Maps or a Leafly like really figure it out in a lot of markets. It's just really difficult with the way that the industry has shifted over the last couple of years away from a lot of profitability. It's difficult to make money doing that. So I think that it's interesting on the e-com side, and it's definitely a challenge today. Another big aspect of it is your dispensary is the one that manages the end consumer. Like if you're a brand in the space, you don't really have any idea who's buying your product. Like there is no
Zero
data
idea.
connectivity. And it's definitely something that we think a lot about here at LeafLink. Like there has to be attribution back up the supply chain of purchasing. That's one of the key problems with e-com today. If you're a brand, you have no idea who's buying your stuff. You have no idea who to advertise to. You have no idea like what the end consumer profile looks like. And that makes it really challenging to like better pursue strategies for things like e-com growth, where you're like really reliant on the dispensary CRM, the dispensary's connection and relationship with the customers. Like you just don't have a lot of leverage in the
Let me
process of a
let me
brand.
actually take that a step further, because you touched on something that I'm very familiar with, and that was a giant pain in my ass when we were at Heisman, right? We were an asset light brand, so when you talk about relying on e-commerce and the dispensaries POS and everything else, when you're an asset light brand like us and Old Pal and Binsk and a lot of the people that are out there, we are even more one step removed from that, because we are an overall national brand that's licensing in multiple markets to different operators, right? So we now rely on that rely on that operator, who then in turn is then relying on the POSs and the U's of the world and everybody else to get that information. And I'll be honest, a lot of times, like, and most of the time, almost all the time, when you have that type of company and your deal structure is based on royalty, that royalty is a percent of profit or revenue or whatever you negotiate, you really don't even have insight into what your royalty should be. There is no single source of truth, and that's something that has blown my mind and something that I truly struggled with. Like, when I was doing it, I luckily, I think I had 4 markets at the height of it. I created spreadsheets and I let my operating partners organize them in the way that made it easy for them, because I knew I would get the information. It wasn't the way I needed it, and then I would take my time to organize it the way that I did. But I knew that if I allowed them to do it the way that they wanted to do it, that at least I would get it on time. If when I tried to make them do it the way that I needed it, it would be late or it wouldn't come, or it'd be whatever it was. And that was something that I truly struggled with. I don't know if this is something that you guys help with, but that's what brands truly need right now. Is they don't even all the way to the front lines to know who's buying their product. They have zero access to that. Which retailers, a lot of times we're borrowing and stealing data from the companies that we happen to be friends with. Like, you might get a couple of emails from me, I need some data. But and we're looking like, where are we selling, how much are we selling for? So when all of a sudden that spreadsheet that the operator sends us and says this is what your royalty is, like, we can kind of justify it. But I think that's something that there needs to be more transparent systems in this, and that's stuff that I know I'm working towards. I hope you guys are as well, because the industry just needs that as a whole.
Yeah, there is horrific end-to-end visibility across the supply chain in our space. A lot of it has to do with just data systems are not organized to speak to one another. Like, your B2C e-com platforms have been integrated into point of sale systems. Like, that was a trend that happened with aggressive M&A over the last few years. So like, that's been figured out. Then you don't really have this like POS and downstream connectivity to like all the different processes in your manufacturing chain among your cultivators and cultivation type softwares. And like, that lack of visibility is just, again, another headwind that a lot of companies in our space face. Like, when you're managing a brand, you don't know what strategy to pursue in each of your different
We
markets. You don't know who the customers you're selling to are. Like, there is no feedback of that data back up the chain. And that's
we
definitely a
knew
problem.
we were advertising to sports fans who consume cannabis, because that was what our brand was created around. But like, I didn't know what the average age or gender or location of the person buying my brand was. The only reason I knew the stores is because I asked for reports and I got them weekly. But yeah, it was, and because we had a very close relationship with our operators, because they're a small team. But like, it's once we grew, and it wasn't sustainable and it wasn't scalable by any means.
Yeah, I mean, look, my main responsibility at LeafLink is to manage mergers and acquisitions. We're very lucky to have raised money earlier in the year, and we're looking at how do we best work to consolidate a lot of the disparate systems that exist in the space. Like, until you really meaningfully integrate data systems across the value chain, like, we're never going to solve these problems. At LeafLink, we feel very fortunate in the place that we sit. Like, there isn't really a data platform that has this connectivity between the brands and the retailers. So we think using that position to like really help like come up with products and productize solutions to a lot of these like advertising type problems, inventory management type problems, like financial services and payments. Like, these are all ideas that we're really working on solving here at LeafLink, just because of like the position we have in the market. Like, we're a leader and we want to help lead the solutions for a lot of these issues. And like, clearly you're echoing that they exist very strongly.
Yeah, dude. No, it's funny. That's a big reason why I took the job at Green Check, right? Like, I love being plant touching. I love building a brand. Like, I love being close to the plant, but I also realize that this industry has a lot of shortcomings, and not because it's a crappy industry, just because of the regulations. And that, most of these technology companies were created from scratch because the bigger players didn't want to come in, or they didn't want to touch weed at the time. So like, we're the epitome of, you don't want to help us, we're going to do it our damn selves, right? That's what this industry has done. You know, there are companies that do what you do for other industries. They're not here. You guys are able to succeed because of that, and that's fucking awesome, right? And that's what I love about it. I took the opportunity at Green Check because I saw the acquisitions that they made. I saw what they were trying to do, and I looked at it and I said, I have the opportunity to build something to help my former colleagues, the folks, you know, I mentioned a couple brands earlier. Those are my friends. Like, these are the people that it's funny. Like, it's a competitive industry, but it's not. Like, the guys in Sacramento, they're all friends for the most part, friends with each other. The brands, we're friends with each other. We talk, we want to see each other succeed. We applaud their success, which is why I love the industry. And now I feel I'm in a place where I can actually help build and provide those tools for those folks to succeed. And that's extremely exciting. Whether I get, you know, I don't need people to know it's me, but as long as we can offer those products and improve the industry, and I feel like you're in the same boat, it is a very, very fulfilling job.
Yeah, absolutely. I care a lot about the industry. I'm really passionate about the plant, and like I love my role at LeafLink because I feel like I get to one see like so many different trends and insights across all of the states in our country. But at the same time, I feel like I'm at a platform that's like really helping support not only our customers but the tens of thousands of people that are employed by them, the hundreds of thousands of people that are like family members relying on them to like support on a day-to-day basis. So I just feel really lucky to be at LeafLink, and like some of the work we're doing for our customers is making a huge difference. So I'm really glad to be in this industry.
Yeah, dude, it's awesome. It's so much fun. I was in finance prior to this. It sucked compared to weed. People weren't nearly as friendly. Everyone was trying to stab me in the back and get information and everything else. Like, fuck. And then technology before that is funny. I gravitated to the people who smoked weed and technology. So I think it's only fortuitous that I ended up here. Ben, we're getting towards the top of the hour here, man. This was a very easy and great conversation. You know, maybe next time we'll do one of these in person. I'm sure I'll be up in New York plenty. What do we have to look forward to next year? You know, what excites you most about the industry? What's going on for the end of the year? Give us it all.
Yeah, look, I'm most looking forward to the license issuances that we're going to get in our home state of New York. Like we're headquartered in New York City. We care a lot about supporting the development of the market in our backyard.
1 second. Gotham is one of the nicest dispensaries I've ever been to in my life. Like, I
Yeah, and
truly mean that.
they purchase on our platform. They're an awesome customer. I mean, they've just like really figured out how to do the premium customer experience. I think that's what you need to compete with a lot of these illicit stores, right? Like they have tons of product for very cheap prices, all of it from California, Oklahoma, or Michigan. So when I think about like how do you pursue a strategy as a legal player to like really make a difference from what you have is over like 1,500 type of stores of them, is going after this premium customer that's going to have larger basket sizes, spend more, and come with higher velocity. So I 100% agree with you. Gotham's doing an awesome job of like figuring out this market. But yeah, I mean, look, New York's going to issue over 1,000 licenses at some point in the next 3 months. That's going to be a really positive trend for one, all of the former card applicants that were relying on like the launch of their businesses to support their day-to-day livelihoods. At the same time, I think the wider accessibility of the program in a place like New York City is just going to pay off huge dividends for overall sentiment change and like legalization trends and like all of these like positive indicators that we see for future growth of this market, not next year or the next year, but like 5, 10 years out, is how do you get the largest part of the population starting to be interested in cannabis, understand the product and consuming. And as we've said a lot, it's about increasing accessibility on the retail side. And you have states like New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Maryland, Minnesota that are doing a spectacular job of doing it. So I'm just really excited to see how all of that comes out and continue supporting an industry that, despite having faced some really tough times over the last couple of years, is definitely ready for the green shoots that we deserve.
Dude, it's been great talking to you. We'll definitely do this again. If you want to leave any contact information, anything along the lines, let's do that and let's get out of here.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, look, if you're looking for any information about LeafLink, come to our website, leaflink.com. My name's Ben Burstein. I manage our mergers and acquisitions, thought leadership, and some of our strategies type tough internally. So my job is to help our customers achieve the best objectives possible. I want to make sure that our platform is doing the most for the industry as we can. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me personally, Ben.Burstein at LeafLink.com. I'm happy to help however I can, put you in the right direction, because I think our platform is the solution for our industry to start figuring out margins and really achieve profitability.
And you just got like 6 offers to buy the MJ Biz attendee list in your inbox after giving out that email. I know you're getting those emails too, man. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to everybody at home for watching. Of course, if you missed any part of this interview and you'd like to see it, you can check it out on youtube.com/elevateyourgrind, or you can check it out on Apple or Spotify if you don't have the time to watch it. You want to listen to it on the plane, in the car, wherever you are. Check out Eventbrite, Cannabis Lab for all things C Lab. Check out joinclab.com. Folks, it's been another episode of Elevate Your Grind.